All right, I guess we'll begin. I got my old notes, so I started off with good evening, so we're going to start off with good morning today. Okay, my name is Joe Janier. I'll be acting as a moderator on the Arundecoit Library Board regarding their vision for expansion. Mr. Terry Buford will be the director. The director will introduce the board members and those on the committee, and beforehand he will be giving a presentation on what's taking place. Before we begin, let's have the agenda completely straight. Mr. Peter Mendick will be taking questions. The volunteers will be going through. You have to write your question out. They'll be handed to Mr. Mendick, and he will read the questions regarding what's taken place or your questions to him. Please leave your name on it, your email or telephone number, so if we don't get your question in, we'll get back to you on what the answer is to it. There are some standard questions even the library proposed to bring forth, so you don't have to repeat them, but just listen to what the questions are so you know it might be the same question you're asking that somebody else is asking, so if they don't get to yours, it'll be the same answer. Terry, would you like to go ahead with your 2.5-hour presentation on the vision of the library? Could you cut it down just a little? Okay.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 22nd public presentation on the Library Board's proposal for a new public library. So let's start off with why are we here for the 22nd time? As you probably know, in April, residents did overwhelmingly approve a referendum to build a new library. And some residents in town, 7 of them, filed a lawsuit to prevent that from happening. And after consulting with the town's legal advisors, the town board decided that they would rather move ahead with the project than wait for something that could take over a year to take place. And so the environmental study that was at dispute was redone, and the residents who had filed that lawsuit agreed to drop the suit. Votes are not required for towns to bond or borrow money. But from the beginning, the library board was intent on holding a referendum because we were certain that this was a popular project, and who wants to do something that isn't popular, that most people don't want. So we believe most people want to build a new library, and so we were totally engaged in holding a referendum from the beginning. But since we'd already had one, we really didn't want to have another one, and so we were ready to proceed without a second referendum. Residents gathered enough signatures on petitions to force that referendum, so there will be another one Saturday, December 14th, and that's why we're here. A few things have changed since the last time we got together. We've been listening to what residents have to say and what their concerns about the project are, even those who are in favor of it. And so we have reworked some of our plans to make the building a bit smaller. The advantages of that are a smaller footprint on the town hall campus means more green space, more opportunities for parking, and not much else has changed other than that small change to our proposal. But I want to remind everyone that the second environmental study that was done by Passero and Associates returned the exact same results that the first disputed study returned, and that is examining the 20 points that are necessary to do an environmental proposal. All 20 points were negative impact, and that's no change. So we're still pretty much where we were before, a new central library, complementing the town hall architecture, giving us larger spaces for more expanded and sophisticated library operations, better programming space, the ability to cooperate with other town departments to offer space and joint programs, and giving more space for community organizations. Over the last year, we met with many, many community organizations. I dare say almost all of them. And as soon as we started talking about meeting space and room for programs, they all started nodding their heads because this is something they all really, really want. And of course, with the additional space, there's always the opportunity to have a revenue-producing operation, which would reduce our costs.
Some additional uses that we'd like to be able to offer that residents say they need that we're unable to offer in our two current buildings is group study areas for students who are studying together. Families who may be homeschooling need some space where they can bring their students and study. Literacy volunteers and literacy groups that are working together. If residents are going for their degrees online, having space in a library that they can study and do their work. These are all things that we currently are unable to provide. In addition, comfortable seating is something we're seriously lacking in the space that we have. A big question that does come up with the size of the facility is with things being digitally focus now, why do we need more space? Well, one of the things we want to include in our new library is the capability to have download stations, to have space where people can come and use their digital media devices within the library in comfortable areas. So the need for space isn't going away, it's just the way that we will use the space will be different. And we envision a very flexible design so that as the needs for the community change and digital media continues to shift, the library is able to more adequately adapt to those changes.
Another thing we should mention here is that recently some people have come to us and said, golly, you know, what about the students? Right now you're right down the street from the schools. Why would you want to leave those spaces? Well, if you actually speak to the students, the ones that we spoke to are completely behind this plan. This past summer, a group of students in summer school at the Western Irondequoit School District studied this proposal and approved it overwhelmingly. They understand how the library is changing, and they understand that the space that's needed to have a modern-day library is very different from the book palaces that we used to have. I think that when we went to the Eastern Irondequoit School District and met with the government student classes, three of those, and when we attended the presentation by the students at the Western Irondequoit School District, they all studied this situation closely, and they understand what's needed, and that's why they're behind the project. So what is the problem now? Well, the last time the town of Irondequoit renovated or expanded their libraries was in 1985. And we find ourselves with not enough space and facilities to carry out the mission and also to carry out the things that our patrons tell us that they want. And cosmetic improvements, they're not enough. Roll out some new carpet and paint the walls a different color. It doesn't make your library any bigger. It doesn't make it any better. And the lack of space really curtails our operations and really prevents us from doing some of the things that our patrons want. And it prevents people from using the library in the way they want without disrupting other patrons. We deal with this every day. Yes, the buildings are in poor condition, but it's not because we haven't been spending money on them. We average spending $44,000 a year on maintenance and upgrades to our buildings, and that's not enough. Our two branches still 2.6 miles apart. We duplicate a lot of services. We'd rather spend that money on library services, but right now we can't do that.
I'd like to add that the last major renovation was in 1985, and Helen McGraw at the time of that renovation is quoted as saying that the expansion is already outdated. There still wasn't enough space added even in 1985, so what we as a library board are really trying hard to do is to not duplicate those mistakes so that future generations are not faced with the same difficult decisions that we're facing right now.
Here's an interesting slide. This slide shows you how far behind we are in terms of keeping our libraries up to date. Up the left-hand side is a scale of years, and along the bottom are the major town libraries in the county library system. And that bar graph tells you how many years it's been since any of them built a new library or renovated. As you can see, we're leading the league here by quite a large margin, and it's not a category we want to be leading in. As you can see, Gates just built a library, and Greece just, believe it or not, renovated their library. And strangely enough, the renovations that they did, they added meeting rooms. When Greece built their library, they had to scale down the size of the building in order to make the budget. Yes, that can be done. And so what they did is they cut out a couple meeting rooms that were in the original plan. And then as library services evolved, they realized we got plenty of room for books. We don't have enough room for groups of people to meet. So they actually tore out a whole section of shelves and put those meeting rooms back into the plan. And they did that, I think, a year ago. So they've already renovated once. Brighton is working with a consultant for a renovation of their library. So is Fairport. So is Chili. I think that pretty much covers it. But as you can see, we're sticking way up there in a place where you don't want to be. Again, we can look at another chart here that demonstrates our situation in another way, and that is by the size of the buildings. Up the left-hand side of the scale, you'll see the square footage of the buildings in the major libraries in the county. And beneath the names of the towns are the populations that they serve. And the numbers at the top of the bar graphs are the square footages of the buildings. And again, we're way down, but actually the slide is more optimistic than it really should be, because we don't really have a 24,000 square foot library. We have two 12,000 square foot libraries. And in each one of those 12,000 square foot libraries, we're trying to do what Webster's doing in 42,000 square feet, and what Pittsford's doing in 30,000 square feet, and what Greece is doing in 38,000 square feet, and so on. And let me tell you, that is a challenge, because everybody here in town wants what people in Webster have and what people in Fairport have, and we're doing it in a half or 1/3 of the space. And man, that's hard. And there's always that conflict. People use the library in a normal way. They still bother people who are using the library in their way because we don't have enough space for everyone. We'd like to cure that problem.
The other thing with two branches, again, I don't think this can be stressed enough, is that we are taking our budget dollars, your tax dollars, and stretching them between two full-service branches. So we're trying to maintain that on a budget that's been very tight, and it's becoming increasingly difficult, and it's quite frankly not a sustainable situation. By combining our resources and pooling them together, we can make our tax dollars a lot more efficient, a lot more powerful for ourselves and for future generations.
So when I look at this chart, the question that comes to mind for me immediately is, why do we need a bigger library than what Webster has and what Greece has? Well, Greece and Webster have recreation buildings and community center buildings that we don't have. And so we're thinking that with an extra meeting room or two, we can take a little bit of the pressure off some of the other departments and some of the other buildings in town where community groups meet and carry on their activities. This is my favorite part of the presentation. I like to call this, "What's the rush?" Invariably, someone will say, well, why are you rushing into this? What's the hurry? And this is our answer to that. In 1985, the libraries were expanded to what they are now. And from then on, we've studied and studied and studied. I'll just run through these quickly. In 98, the library did a study. In 99, the library did another study. In 2002, the town did a study, and another one connected with that in 2003. And then we came back and studied it again in 2005. And then the town studied Kings Park in 2006. And then we looked at expanding the McGraw branch only in 2009. And then we hired Passero to update the numbers from 2005. So since 1998, we've been studying this. So we say, what's the rush? But we don't feel like we're rushing. So why the town hall campus? Well, way back when I was hired 11 years ago, I think I was hired for my expertise in building new libraries. So I'm frustrated. The library board came out and said, we want to build a central library. We want to combine all our resources. We want to stop wasting money on inefficiency. And we promise we will try to find the most central location possible to build this building. Well, we've been around town. We've looked and looked and looked. And you know what? If you put your finger on a map of the town and try to find the central location, you're going to come pretty close to this town hall campus. This is the central location. And as you can see, there's other advantages too. We don't have to buy any land to build this building. We're not going to buy any property somewhere and remove it from the tax rolls. Pedestrians and bicyclists can reach it safely. And per our study, parking and traffic will be fine. We will continue to hold festivals on the town hall campus. And in fact, we're very excited about the possibility of getting involved in those festivals.
The 4th of July Festival is actually a big question and comment that people come up with, and no, the library is not going to take away the beer tent. We're not going to take away the crafters. We know that it's an important festival for our residents and even beyond Irondequoit. So the festivities and crafters and everything will just shift to the west lawn. So it'll still take place. It might just look a little bit different, but it'll still take place with all its fun and activities that happen throughout that festival.
Okay, so a lot of people want to know, how come you don't have a drawing of the building? You know, why can't you show me what it's going to look like? Well, if you could sit down and go through the costs associated with hiring design professionals, you'll know that we weren't going to come up with an exact design until we knew we were going to actually build this building. And so what we did get is some ideas from local architectural firms that were interested in the project. And so we've got a couple of them to show you right here. This first one is from Passero Associates, and you can see their idea was a 2-story building with equal-sized stories, expanding Columbus Way on the east side to create a double row of parking there, and then the rest of the parking behind the building between the main entrance to the building and the Department of Public Works. And as we always like to say, no, we don't have the power to switch Titus back to a 4-lane road. Here's another concept by another local firm, Barkstrom and LaCroix. Their idea was a little different. Spread more of it out on the first floor and only have a partial second floor. These are things that we'll be discussing when this building gets designed, and obviously we'll be seeking your input as well. There are advantages and disadvantages to any of these plans. If you spread it all out on one floor, it's easier to operate and easier to monitor security-wise, but it takes up more of that green space that we're trying to preserve. So if you make the building more vertical, you get that smaller footprint with more opportunities for parking and green space, but it requires a few more people to operate, especially on nights and weekends when that second floor has to be monitored. So these are things that are going to be worked out, and hopefully with input from all of you.
There's, after these two individual concepts were submitted, Barkstrom and LaCroix joined forces with Passero, and we do have a third concept that's in the back of the room where it kind of combines the two concepts into one. And while we don't have a final design, what we think these concepts do show are the possibilities, that there are possibilities for the town hall campus. There are possibilities to make sure that the architecture of the building complements the town hall, that it doesn't overwhelm the town hall. There's things that architecturally can be done to make sure that it's visually appealing from the curb and as you approach Town Hall. So the different concepts we think do exemplify that.
When this building opens, it will be opening in combination with a reworking of the way parking and traffic flow works on the Town Hall campus. In addition to the parking that will be added around the library, we'll also be adding parking lots to the north of the DPW building to have more employee parking and town vehicles parked there, freeing up spaces in the main parking lot and keeping the spaces around the library free for library customers. This is just a map of the town, and that big pink dot in the middle is the Town Hall campus. So when we say central location, that's what we're talking about. Our dedicated development department head, Larry Heiniger, did a study. He mapped out the position of every public library in the county in relation to the district that it was in, and he found that from this location, we'll have the most centrally located library in the county. No other town will have such short distances to travel to visit the library. I think the farthest distance that any person in town would have to travel was 3 miles. Larry, are you out there?
We were the only town under 4 miles, and it was 3.6 as the crow flies from Empire Boulevard to the Bridge.
So not just centrally located for this town, but the most centrally located library in the county library system.
The average of all towns was 5.9 miles.
So it's not even close. So how will library services improve? They'll improve in a lot of ways. But the first thing that we want to talk about is that some of those improvements aren't known because we don't know how the community will change. But when the community changes, the library changes with it. So yes, as you all slowly get into reading ebooks, and we don't need great big rooms full of encyclopedias and things like that, we convert those to comfortable seating areas or meeting rooms or things like that. So there are things coming down the road that we don't even know about, and we, with more space, we'll be prepared to respond and serve those new needs. One of the things that's happening that's very exciting in the information world right now is that our customers are evolving from content seekers to content creators. It used to be people came to the library, they wanted information, they found what they wanted, they took it away. Now they come to the library, they get on a computer, they create information. Sometimes it's something as simple as a resume or a cover letter or taking that information and putting it up on a national job search board like monster.com. But sometimes it's something a little more fun like updating your Facebook page or putting photographs up on your Flickr account or who knows. But our patrons are content creators, not just users. And of course we provide the hardware and the connections for them to do that. Right now we're doing a poor job of assisting users who have mobility difficulties. Our restrooms are not handicapped accessible. Our children and teen areas are so small and so close to each other that just normal usage of those spaces generates noise that other patrons are bothered by. And this is a daily problem. We're not talking about misbehavior, we're just talking about people who want to use the library, maybe with a little enthusiasm. Monday morning, I'm on the reference desk, and story hours starting. So the moms and the younger kids or the older kids are upstairs in the children's area just being children, and you could see the frowns on the faces of the computer users every time there was a little shriek of joy or something like that. You know, we really need enough space so that every segment of the community can use the library the way they're comfortable. And we don't have that now. We would love to have a quiet room so that people who want that traditional quiet space to study, contemplate, and not be bothered, we really want to have that. It's one of the things people request most. And of course, space for community meetings, programming, teaching. The library's become an educational institution where lifelong learning takes place, and I teach some of those classes myself. We train people a lot, and we need space to do that too.
Another question and comment when we get about how services are going to be improved is, how are we going to be able to do this without our budget going through the roof, doubling or tripling, as some of the people have been saying. Well, what we're going to do, work really hard as a library board, is by reducing that duplication of separation, of those two branches that are less than 3 miles apart, by reducing the duplication of not just our physical resources, but our personnel, we're going to be able to use all of those resources much more efficiently. So there could be some really fantastic programs that our librarians want to be able to introduce for our patrons, but because they're separated doing the same thing in each branch, they're unable to introduce some new services and some new programming. So by bringing our resources together, the physical and the personnel resources, we'll be able to maximize that budget and introduce services, things like Sunday hours that most other libraries and other towns are able to offer that we're unable to offer because our staffs are divided between two branches. And that's a big thing that we'd like to be able to provide, that we will be able to provide once they're together in one branch.
So I guess I just want to say it's not that the library staff and budget's going to get bigger, it's just going to get better, more efficient, and more of our resources are going to go toward serving the community instead of trying to carry out this crazy idea of having two full-service libraries just 2.5 miles apart. And in case you doubt me, libraries are not going away. There's a terrific company out there called the Pew Research Institute. And a couple of crazy visionaries, you may have heard of them, Bill Gates, Melinda Gates, Microsoft, they're big library lovers. And so they donated a couple of $1 million to Pew Research and asked them to regularly assess the country's attitudes about libraries and learning and information. And so this year, in fact, they surveyed people about their attitude about the library. Yes, it's true. Digital materials are becoming more popular, but by far the top reason people visit the library is still to borrow things and take them home. And the second highest answer was to use internet and Wi-Fi. A lot of people think that, okay, yeah, people of a certain age still like libraries, but the kids, they don't care about the library anymore. And that's just not true. 60% of young adults said they still visit the library often. 80% of Americans say borrowing books is still important. And that reference services, question answering, information services are important. And 77% said free access to computers and the internet is very important. Think democracy, people. The library is the most democratic institution out there because you can come to the library and you can research anything you want to find out about and encounter every possible opinion out there. And that includes electronic resources, even if you don't have an internet connection at home. Don't know how to do that? We will train you for free. So what does our business community think about this? They're against it, right? No. The Chamber of Commerce has enthusiastically supported this project. And if you look at the screen, you'll see this is the quote from their official endorsement of building this library. The Chamber of Commerce recognizes that a 21st century central library will offer the types of valued services and amenities that attract home buyers, retain homeowners, keep the business and spending power of residents in the Irondequoit community for the good of our merchants and the good of our residents. The Irondequoit Chamber of Commerce endorses this long overdue plan, no pun intended. So yes, it will cost money to build a new library, and we are talking about borrowing or bonding up to $13 million. Our calculation is that if your house is worth $100,000, this means a $29 increase in your taxes, or 29 cents per $1,000 of assessed value, or $2.42 a month. This is based on a 30-year bond with a 3% interest rate. Interest rates are still pretty low. Not as low as they were in April, but they're still pretty low. The important thing to remember here is that we are not intending to go over this $13 million mark. If we're wrong in our costs, the project will get smaller. We're not about cost overruns here. We're not about bait and switch. We say 13 million, we mean it. Just as they did in Greece, you know, they whittled a few things off of their project to keep it on budget. We'll do the same.
And the $29 per year is what, that's the broad magnitude. Is that the right word I'm using? Because what will happen is the town won't automatically go out and borrow $13 million right away, because then interest starts accruing on that $13 million right away. So they would borrow what are called bond anticipation notes, which have a much lower interest rate. So for the first few years of the project, what you'll see in your tax increase could be much, much lower. Some of the reports we were seeing were $8 a year or 8 cents on $1,000 of assessed value. So it won't be all at once, and we don't have to spend it all at once. So that $29 a year is kind of a broad picture.
And hey, we may not have to spend it all at all, because there are other ways to make money for a project like this, and we are working on those. And fundraising is going to be a very important part of this project. We have a fundraising team in place ready to get going, and we've done some fundraising events, as you know, and there are grants that are available, grants that weren't available to us to repair our buildings, but we've been promised will be available to us when we get this new library project off the ground. People are concerned about what will happen to the old buildings, and so we need to recap that as well. The Evans branch on Cooper Road will revert to the West Irondequoit School District. When that building was built in 1963, the school district sold it to the town for $1 as long as they agreed to build a library there. The agreement says that we must keep a library there or keep some other town operation going there, or it reverts back to the school district. The East branch on Ridge Road, the McGraw branch, can be sold, and we're anticipating that we'll bring in well over $1 million for that. We've already had feelers from companies that would love to build their business there.
The grants option on this screen is important to cover, because there's New York State Library construction grants that are available to libraries throughout New York. And we have been told, we've applied for those regularly to try to defray costs to taxpayers to do certain things on our branches. A couple of years ago, the Monroe County Library System Board denied our most recent grant request. And when we went to appeal it, we were told pretty much in no uncertain terms until we address the space issue. And that's the bottom line. We don't offer the adequate space to our residents, that we will no longer qualify for New York State Library construction grants. So several of the options that we did study, and we studied many options before we decided on this one, several of those other options would not qualify for those grants. So this option, because it addresses our basic space need, we would once again be eligible for those grants, which is traditionally about $500,000 each year.
When we had some of our meetings with prominent members of the business community, they actually gave us some advice on how to explain this project. And one of the things they said is, don't just say you're building a $13 million building, because that's not an accurate picture of the entire situation. Talk about the money you'll have to spend if you stay where you are just to keep those current buildings going. And so as part of our original study by the Thomas Group in 2005, we had the buildings surveyed by engineers telling us what we needed to do to make those buildings useful in the short term, and what we would have to do to them to keep them viable as public library buildings in the long term. This is important. So important that we paid Passero Associates to update those numbers last year so that they'd be more accurate. Short term, we need $2.2 million to keep those buildings going short term, because they're in pretty rough shape. Long-term, we need $6.1 million if we were going to continue to use those libraries in the long term instead of building a new building. Now, of course, we wouldn't get any of that space that we need. We wouldn't improve our programs or our services in any way, but at least the roof would stop leaking. We'd actually have decent heating and cooling, handicapped accessible restrooms, things like that.
I think I'd like to talk about the third option that would fall under this, because these are the three options that would basically maintain, actually there's a fourth option that would maintain the duplication of services between two branches. I think some of what was handed out to you today claims that I may have misrepresented this particular figure, but I do have the report. To upgrade and expand the two existing branches with all expenses included would be $13,697,000. That would be to upgrade and expand the two current branches. Excuse me, to demolish the two buildings and start over and possibly acquire additional property around it, which would mean taking people's homes or buying additional property that would then take more property off the tax rolls, is a little over $15 million. And all of those four options continue to maintain us trying to stretch our budget between two branches. The only option that doesn't continue the duplication of services and stretching our budget is the single branch option.
So we put together a little chart here to show you what the difference is. Maybe this is overkill, but this is side-by-side comparison of what a central library gives us versus staying in our two current branches. Meets community needs, plans for the future, puts property back on the tax rolls, a central location, the right size for what we need to do based on input from the community and studies by space planners and architects. A flexible and adaptable space so that as the need for different services arrives, we can easily meet those needs. Better parking, better facilities for people who don't get around so well, better hours, return materials without getting out of your car. There's about 1,000 moms out there who want that. Potential for revenue producing space, for instance, a coffee shop. And we'd have a green building, ecologically sound, energy saving. There's grant money available for those types of projects as well, and that will be a criteria that we use when selecting an architect. We will again be eligible for New York State construction grants. As Stephanie said, that could be as much as $1 million over 2 years. We'll eliminate all that duplication, and it'll cost $29 a year in additional to each homeowner.
A point of clarification, I think that $22 per year for the upgrading of two old branches might sound appealing, but that is $22 a year for 15 years, and at the end of 15 years, we would still have our two branches without any additional square footage, without any additional space, without that flexibility to perhaps adapt and change to meet the needs of those residents, of our residents and us in 15 years. So, so the difference of $7 per year for a little bit longer gets us everything we need and plans for the future.
That's that cost of doing nothing thing again. So the cost of doing nothing could be as high as $22 a year. So as I said at the outset, we want this to be up to you. We don't want to dictate anything. We want you to decide. And so you will get yet another opportunity to do that on Saturday, December 14th. And one polling place for all residents, which eliminates the cost of mailings. And you must be a registered voter, and you will have to show ID to vote. That's important because I think that caught a few people by surprise in April. Absentee ballots are available. The town clerk's office is right up the hallway, or you can call at that number. I think we've already mailed out the military ballots, right? Yes. So we're well on the way here.
I think I'd like to address just one more thing on this screen. Some people have expressed concern, you went from 2 locations to 1 location. What we discovered during the vote in April, the 2 locations, is we didn't have enough inspectors. It was the check-in time that seemed to back up the lines. So town officials are working with the Board of Elections to make sure that we have more than double the amount of inspectors, so people will have shorter lines to wait on. There's plenty of parking, there's plenty of space inside. If it is inclement weather outside, we'll make sure that we'll have ushers inside, making sure that you're able to stand inside and wait. But again, we're making every effort to make sure that those lines are shorter. And there, like I said, there is plenty of parking. If you work on Saturday, or if you're going to be out of town, or you've already, gone out of town already for the winter, like Terry said, absentee ballots are available. And we think this is too important of a decision, again, to not maybe wait in line for just a little bit to cast your vote and make sure your voice is heard.
Okay, these are librarians talking to you today, so we got information. We got lots of information. This is our 22nd meeting. We post the questions and answers on our website. There are also printed copies available of all these handouts, and as well as the frequently asked questions at both of our library branches. If you go to our website dedicated to this project, libraryproposal.com, all of this stuff is available digitally. You'll also see video of past presentations. We send out informational blurbs on Twitter at Library Proposal, and we also have a Facebook page as well. You can also email the library board with questions at iplboard@yahoo.com, or you can email me at tbuford@libraryweb.org, or you can call me at that number, and if I'm not at my desk, I'll be surprised, but if I'm not, you can leave me a voicemail message. We will get back to you. We thank you for your time here today, and if you'll hang around, we're going to take questions from the audience, try to answer them the best we can. Just write them down and pass them up. We'll read them out loud, and we'll answer them. We're right up here. Thank you very much.
Before we begin, we'll have each member of the library board introduce themselves. Mr. Perticone, would you like to start off, please?
Yes, John Perticone. I'm the town board liaison, obviously between the library and the town board.
Jack Harma, resident of town for over 60 years. Married my wife here, raised 4 sons, and loved this beautiful town.
And I'm Fran Mannion. I am a retired school administrator and now a resident of Arundecoit, and I'm hoping I can add some value to the library board.
I'm Elaine Cole. I've been a resident of the town for over 35 years. I'm a retired attorney, and I've been on the library board for about 7 years.
I'm David Heffer. I'm a 20-year Arundecoit resident, and I'm currently the longest-serving board member. I'm finishing out my 14th year.
I'm Mary Ellen Jones, and I'm a over 50-year resident of the town of Arundecoit. I'm a former educator and a former state senator, and I've been a member of the library board for about 6 years.
I'm Stephanie Squiccerini. I've been a resident for about 15 years. I'm also a teen services librarian at the Fairport Public Library, and I'm also the founder and director of the Greater Rochester Teen Book Festival, now planning our 9th year.
Terry Buford, I'm Terry Buford. I'm director of the library, and I've been in this job for about 10 years.
Again, I'm Joe Janier. I've been on the board probably 6 weeks, 3 hours, and 47 minutes. My claim to fame, I'm the former owner of the Cooper Dell. The gentleman who will be doing the questions is Peter Mendick, who's been a resident of the town of Arundecoit for an extended period of time. He also owns the apartment projects within the town of Arundecoit. Peter, if you'd like to start off with the first question.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Janier. First question regarding ADA compliancy. The McGraw Library is not ADA compliant. A person in a wheelchair cannot get through the stacks or use the bathroom. How would that be addressed in the new library? Is it possible to make the McGraw Library ADA compliant?
It is possible to make the McGraw Branch ADA compliant, and that would be part of that cost of doing nothing number that we told you about, the $6 million. We basically need to gut that section of the building and tear out all the existing restrooms and replace them. And of course, they need to be a little bit bigger to be ADA compliant, so we'd have to sacrifice some space somewhere else. One of the really appalling situations in both of our branches is that the restrooms are so small and so cramped, and they're also right on top of where the employees work and eat. And sometimes those two missions don't really work well together. And so, if we should stay in those buildings, I think fixing that restroom problem would be one of my first goals. And we in a new building, of course, all of that will change. I think technically we are like a half an inch within the minimum compliance for the space between the stacks. Clearly, that's not really adequate. And so in a new building, we'll not only have a lot more space between every fixed object, but we'll have the room to put the things not so close to the floor and not so high up in the air, so that, say, a person who's on crutches or in a wheelchair will be able to reach the things on the shelves in a way that they definitely cannot do now.
1 second. My manners are a little lax today. I'd like to introduce Mary Joyce DeRizio, the supervisor of the town of Arundequite. And I'd like to thank her for being here too, as well as Debbie Esley, a town board member. Supervisor to be is Adam Bell, who's stuck way in the corner, and one day he'll be able to come all the way up here. And Mr. Seeley, another town councilman, and I'd like to thank them for their attendance. Did I miss anybody? All right, then. I'm sorry, Peter. Continue.
Very good. Question regarding the footprint of the building. I'm hearing that people object because it would be larger than the town hall. Is this not because the town hall was outgrown 20 years ago, hence the police courts building to the north?
That's a really good point. Yes, the town hall is already out, the functioning of the town hall is already outgrowing, and probably John could speak to that more directly. But that's one of the problems with the buildings that we're faced with too, is that the buildings were built and then they were immediately too small for the needs, and I would suspect that's what happened here. And that's why there's the additional buildings on the town hall campus. John, did you want to speak to the footprint size and the?
I just want to start where we're getting to right now. We just recently put out an RFQ out for the design, architect, construction manager, and site and civil for the library, and we're starting to get some of the proposals back. Now, these are requests for qualifications, and as far as the design, we got probably some of the best in the city here are going to design this. And what we'll do is we'll do it down to a short list. We got about 7 proposals. We're going through it all, and just a couple things under the proposals that I just want to talk to people about that we requested to the design services that'll be quite informative. You're looking at approximately about a 40,000-foot facility, multi-purpose rooms, child-friendly areas, all the things that Terry had talked about. And, lead green technology is a big one in there. Handicap accessible is a big one in there also. So these are all the things that are going to be proposed to the town. We did get the proposals back last Thursday, and some came in on Friday, so we're going over them. In fact, we're going to have a meeting today, and we're going to go over some of them. But, yeah, the building, the couple that we looked at, it's a 40,000 square foot building. How they all come, and they're all different ideas. So you got all these designers, and everybody's come up with different, looks to the building. They're all different. So you got probably a 15 to 20,000 footprint you have there. It is going to be a little bigger, obviously, than the town hall, because the footprint here is about 8,000 square feet. But believe me, when it's going to get situated over at the spot over next to the town hall, and these firms are all aware of it. The parking's going to be a good fit in there as well. We went through. I looked at some of the proposals, and personally, for me, I was impressed with what came back to have us look at. And the certainty there is, they know there's a parking that's going to be addressed, and the green space is going to be addressed, and you'll be really impressed once we're doing the list down to a few proposals. what you're going to see there and what could possibly be built on the site next to us.
Okay, next question. I fear that a new facility likely to be proposed will become a dumping ground for kids and another way for the inner city to encroach.
I'm not sure how that would be different than it is now. We have a branch on Ridge Road, and we have a branch close to Titus Avenue. So that's pretty much what we have now. I think that we actually want to be a dumping ground for kids. We feel that the youth of this town can benefit from having a new library, as long as we have adequate space for them to enjoy it in a way that's respectful but energetic. Right now, when people question me about why we want to move away from the schools, I say, right now our greatest fear is that all the students want to come to the library at the same time because we have no place to put them, and we don't have the facilities to serve them. So in this larger building, I mean, this is really what we're talking about here, having a building and the facilities inside of it to serve the number of people who will want to use it. And right now, we don't have that.
Also, I'd just like to add the point, as far as safety and security, 500 yards from the police department, and there's police cars going back and forth all the time. So that objective should be readily addressed, whether it's from one element or for another. You have security and safety readily available.
I just wanted to make one comment too. I believe the word in front of library is public, and I would hope that we could find a way to welcome anybody who wants to use it, just as we are being welcomed currently in Webster and Greece and the places we go to find things we can't get in our own library.
Next question. Are you building a, quote, library, end quote, or a community center? Something other than a library, i.e. senior center, community center, scout center, band center, sewing club, yoga club, actors guild, union center, speaking club.
We have the point, Peter.
I'm just reading the question. All this extra stuff sounds as if the library will be massive. Where will the extra dollars come from? You only have $13 million.
Can I just make one comment? This is going to be built as a library with multi-purpose rooms. I mean, I don't know what more to explain than that. The town there is some usage here that I'm certainly sure people can use, but I think the gist of this, we are building a library with multi-purpose rooms in it. They're not for any special purpose, but we hope we can help people in the community to use them.
And I think our logo says our library is where the community connects. So a lot of those functions that were listed off there are things that libraries do. Public libraries, Webster has a small knitting club that meets, and they meet right in the library in their comfortable chairs, and they knit and talk about books. I'm not sure yoga will happen out in the public library, in the library proper space, but perhaps in the meeting room. We might have a yoga class. I'd like to I'm told I need to relax more. So perhaps a yoga class, I would benefit from that. And those around me would be thankful that I'd benefit from that. So a library can be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So, but yes, we will be a library that offers, as John said, a lot of different things.
I'd like to think of libraries as they're places to come and get information, but they're also places to exchange information. And how do you exchange information? You meet with your group. So it's a perfect fit for a library to have meeting spaces. It doesn't mean when you're there for a meeting that you don't leave the meeting and go scan the new bookshop.
Well, if there is yoga, I'm glad we're close to RGH because I'm certainly in medical services. Another
Included
question.
me on that, didn't you? I know you did, yes.
Question, did you ever consider keeping and using the existing facilities and expanding services within the 2 high school libraries and media centers? They would be blocked off after school hours so no one roams and staffed with library staff. Much cheaper, no duplication of services, and the best use of all underlying facilities and resources.
We have explored many different options for our buildings. We talked about maybe having one branch be a full-service branch, another branch being more of a internet cafe type of thing, or just a fiction-only kind of thing. Where school libraries come in, it gets very complicated. It sounds like a great idea. It'd probably be very simple. But the school library mission and the public library mission is very different. The school is there to support the curriculum. The public library is to support everything. And while it might sound like it would be cheaper, but you'd have to have security guards at the school. You'd have to have, there would be a lot entailed in there. Yes, the school library is open extended hours for students, but combining the two missions, it's not as easy as it sounds. You're not going to find in your school library some of the popular fiction books that are being made into movies right now. You're not going to find perhaps that barbecue book or how to repair your small engine. There's a whole ton of information that you're not going to find in your school library that the vast majority of our residents do need.
The question also is I don't know of it being done in any other system in Monroe County.
Not in Monroe County, no.
Okay, and the problem is it's a nice dream, but there's educational laws and security that are entirely different from what you may think. So it's not even valid even to consider it because of the education law and such as that. To open the school libraries, it will never happen. The schools are unto themselves as far as legal ramifications and such. So I don't think that would ever happen in the foreseeable future either.
I was totally intrigued by this question the first time it was raised, actually many years ago. And so I looked into it and I did some research, and there have been a few facilities like this around the country, but they were always built for that purpose. So, a town built a new school and they attached a library to it. And then so it had its own separate entrances and its own security. And so when the school was closed, the library was open and so on. So it's not impossible, but it's very, very difficult. I think the studies I was reading about, the case studies, I think about 3/4 of them, the participants were unhappy with the result. And in about 1/4 of them, it actually worked out. So it's not an impossible dream, but the circumstances have to be just right. And generally, it's when you're doing some new construction, and you can build a building that's designed to function that way.
Terry, I'll go out on a limb. It's impossible in New York State.
I would, excuse me.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would have to agree with your thoughts because coming from a school environment and working with multiple districts, the liability component and the intermingling of school staff versus our library staff, if there was any overlap, you've got a whole different level of clearance, security clearance for folks in a school setting that you wouldn't have in a public library setting. So you're immediately, because of insurance and liability components, you're putting staff that is not fingerprint cleared in an environment that requires all of those types of security components. You're putting them and it would be the library and the county into a liable situation.
I think I'd like to expand on the different services that we had looked at and possibly repurposing the two branches and having different types of services at each branch. What we as a board felt, and this is true on many different board formations, we've all been in agreement, that if we were to provide different things in each branch, then different parts of town are getting unequal library service. So it could be that somebody that lives on the west side wants something that only the east side branch has. That means they've got to travel even farther. And again, we're dividing up our budget beyond two branches so that while it sounded like a possible fix, it just wasn't, we didn't feel the most efficient and best use.
Next.
What will happen if the vote does not pass?
This is a scary question because depending on how we answer it, it sounds like we're threatening, but we've faced many, many difficult decisions as a board, and those of us who've been on it for a long time, we've faced multiple difficult decisions over the many years. If this does not pass, and on December 15th we have to change our plans, it will be one of the most difficult decisions we've had to make because, as I think we made clear, at least it's clear in our heads, that two full-service branches is just not a sustainable situation. So one of the options that's really high up there is we go to a single branch. It just won't be centrally located. We own the McGraw branch. That's the building we own outright. It's the branch that has the most flexibility to expand because we own property around it. So that could be a decision we'd be faced with on December 15th if this vote doesn't happen.
One other thing, we actually did look at that possibility, 5 years ago.
Right.
And we decided at that point in time, if we went to a single branch, it would still not be adequate size without obtaining more land, again, which is more expense and takes property off the tax rolls. So we have looked at that possibility. We didn't much like it then. We still don't like it much at the moment.
Question regarding the town's master plan. Comprehensive master plan calls for moving the highway garage. Why is this not being addressed? Why has it not been passed in almost 4 years?
Would we like the supervisor to address that?
Yeah, that's over my pay level.
Supervisor, would you like to address that? I guess you would.
We have to look at some issues in terms of finances. To build a new DPW facility over in a location that's not central to the operations of this town is not in the best financial situation for the town. Having everything pretty centrally located as it is right now, you have the DPW that is able to work on the police cars, as well as the IT individual whose office is here, who has to work on all the police cars as well as DPW computers and so forth. So if anyone were to totally understand the organizational structure of the town and how certain employees work, it is not in the best interest of this town, which is only 15 square miles, to move operations from this site.
Thank you. Mr. Mendick?
This individual has several questions. Question on unexpected costs during the construction, traffic study, and as relates to the traffic crosswalk light that's not timed to cross Portland and Titus. Question on parking, employees, patrons, and buses. How many years to pay the bond? How will concerts, the farmers market, be accommodated? And any poll for long-term residents now on fixed incomes. And I'll be happy to repeat those, because there's quite a few.
Well, we start off with number one. What's number one?
Unexpected costs during the construction.
One thing when we talked about, obviously, the structure of the construction project is going to be, the town will have a construction manager on board, and obviously the design and that. And you know what? This job here is a pretty straightforward type of situation, type of a job. That's one thing that they're going to watch, right? The nuts and bolts, the pennies and the dimes of this project. We're going to make sure we don't have any cost overruns. You're not going to have that type of situation and that type of job. Will it come up? It probably will, but that's something that you're going to put into your bid package, that there's a possibility there may be some cost overruns, some unforeseen circumstances that will happen in construction. Something will come up, but I think in general this is a straightforward type of job. It's not like a big remodel job where you can have a lot of surprises here. This job will be run very well, and we'll make sure that there aren't going to be any cost overruns on this project as much as we possibly can. When you get to the site work and that's where you might have some surprises. But once the building goes up, I don't really see a lot of cost overruns there, and it will be managed very well because you're going to give these people a budget, and that's the budget they're going to stick with, and you're not going to have them spend a dime over what your budget is, and that's the job of the construction manager and working with the customer, which is the town.
Very good. Term of the bond.
Well, once the 30, Mary Joyce probably should speak to this probably more effectively than I would.
I wish I could tell you more specifically, but I could give you some scenarios. The first costs are going to be the professional services. Let us say that they would cost approximately $3 million. This would be for architectural, engineering, infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. It costs $3 million. So what we would do upon the initial decision of how we're going to finance this, we would go to the market and probably seek a ban. I would suggest maybe 6.5 million. That's about half of the 13 million. That ban would be at a lower interest rate because we have improved the Moody's rating, because of the fund balances that have increased. We could look at that being perhaps under 1%. That 1% would be the funding for that 6.5 million, let's say, during that first 5 years, because during that 5 years of that ban, it would have to be turned over to a bond. So then that bond, keeping in mind that there's principal that's going to be paid, and depending on restructuring of the debt that we currently have at the town, that would go into, let's say, the 30 years. A year from the time of that particular ban, we might go for the other 6.5 million. During that 5-year period, that bond or ban would be, let's say, hopefully under 1% interest. And then during that 5-year period, then that ban would then be turned over into a $30 million or $13 million. But again, it just varies on what's happening in the markets at the time. So when we say $29 a year for a $100,000 home, that's the grand magnitude of order. If we look at the shorter term of the bans for 5 years and 5 years, that interest rate is definitely going to be lower. It's like when you buy a home. When you buy that home, you don't think about how much you spent on the interest of that home over 20 years or 30 years. Or the home equity. I think about that with myself. How much interest you spend on that. But you reap the benefits of having that asset over the period of time. So to say exactly how that financing would take place, that would be up to our fiscal advisors and bond counsel in New York, who would determine just what is in the best interest. What I can tell you is that it would not be, let's say, 4% for 30 years beginning today. That's not how the markets work. So it would be a series of bans that would then be turned into bonds. And that's what we do all the time for infrastructure in the town. Fortunately, because we have been able to build reserves, we're not going to the market for mains and laterals for next year. That $500,000 is coming from a fund that we have. So we have been working on the debt structure of the town in anticipation of this project.
Thank you.
And just to further clarify, that $29 per year, the grand magnitude, that includes the interest payments. So it's not $29 plus interest. That's all of those figures that Mary Joyce is talking about includes the interest payment.
Peter?
Another question on the traffic study, and particularly as it applies to employees, patrons, and buses, and the traffic crosswalk at the Portland-Titus intersection.
I was at the town board workshop where Passero presented the full the results of the seeker study, and I wasn't able to stay for the whole thing, but I know that they did address the crosswalk issue, and that was studied. So I'm not sure, John, maybe you can expand on it, but I think all of those issues in the full seeker study that was done this summer, they've all been addressed, and they're all non-issues.
And I know that the traffic study was probably based on a 50,000 square foot building. That's number one. And the other thing is the traffic study actually, and I think they just did one on, there's less traffic today than there's been in the last 10 years. So the traffic study that they had was based on a bigger building that we're proposing now. Traffic will not, it's not going to be, it won't be an issue pertaining to the traffic study because they get their numbers right from the Monroe County, and those are, those are the numbers. I mean, nobody else they didn't make up those numbers, but you do have less traffic today than you did in the past on this intersection right over here.
And to further help the parking, the library staff, when they're coordinating programming, will obviously work with whatever else is happening on the town hall campus to make sure we're not planning a huge event on court night or a huge event when there's already a gazebo concert. We'll be complementing each other's programming. So I think that might also address, there was a question about how the concerts at the gazebo will be impacted. It'll actually give people, when they're here for the concert, another place to stop and enjoy. So we'll just make sure when there is a concert, I'm not saying the staff will make sure that when there is a concert, there may not be a large attendance program planned at the very same time.
And I think the individual is further concerned about the farmer's market.
The farmers market has already shifted to the west lawn to allow for additional parking where the market used to take place. The vendors were actually in the parking lot. Now they're moved to the west lawn to allow for additional parking.
And the last question, any polls conducted for long-term residents now on fixed incomes?
Well, I'm not sure I fully understand that question, but no, we haven't done any targeted polls, but there was a fairly extensive poll done on April 23rd of residents. So I would say that if the majority of residents approve this proposal, then I would say that they're part of that poll that was taken.
I think if you're living on a fixed income, one of the best things you can do is visit the library where everything is free.
We have another response.
One of the things that's interesting in the town of Arundecoit, we have a NORC district, one of few that exists in the state. It's a naturally occurring retirement community, and we're lucky to have it. It exists between Titus Avenue, East Ridge Road, Kings Highway, and Buchart. So this whole area that is just southeast of us from the town hall campus is a naturally occurring retirement community. Interesting, many of the people who live in that area use buses. They walk everywhere they go. So it's interesting how important they feel this project is to the community because they themselves, as a naturally occurring retirement community, would like to see a project of this nature. What I have found interesting every time I speak at their meetings, Sundays, they say once they have gone to church, there's nothing to do. And that is what is really intriguing when we think about our library does need to be open on Sundays. And therefore, that would be something for individuals to have something to do.
Very good. Are there any other question cards?
I would just say that mention of Sunday hours folds right into the last part of that person's question, and that was a question about the employees. Our anticipation is that we will be able to, in our one site, be able to do a lot more with the same number of employees. A few of them will be repurposed to different jobs, but we'll be able to be open on Sunday, and we'll be able to offer all these other services we're talking about with the same number of people that we have now. As you know, personnel costs are the major component of just about any operation, and so if we can give you more and not have to hire more people, which is very expensive, then that's a win-win.
I think while we're waiting for the next question to kind of go back on the senior citizen question, if any of you were at the town board, I believe it was 2 meetings ago, senior citizen stood up and gave a very eloquent speech on how important the library was. And what she said is, because of the fixed income, I can't afford concerts, I can't afford movies, I don't go to plays. The library is my whole social life. I can borrow a movie for free, I can come for programs here, and she expressed it very well, that being on a fixed income, the library is twice as important as for people who can go downtown and go to various other social events.
Okay, I'll do my best to remember those questions. Thank you.
No, you go ahead.
Thank you. There was a question. Apparently, there is a 4 p.m. Mass at Christ the King, and this individual is concerned about parking. Typically arriving around 3:30 there, he can't find a parking space. And how will the parking be addressed on the Christ the King campus?
Excuse me. It has to go through him, ma'am, and it has to be written. This isn't an open forum. I'm sorry, it's not an open forum.
Well, I can address
Stephanie.
we can address the first part of the question, the 4 p.m. Mass. We did have members of the board, and we're working with Spatola Party Rentals to tarp the gym floor, so he was there as well to just take a look at what parking was like at the height of the Mass that does occur at 4 p.m. There are most people who attend the Mass, they're parking in the front where the church part is. The vote will be happening in the back part where the gym is, and there's even when Mass was going on, there was ample parking in the back. The other thing that I think we expect is that a lot of those Mass churchgoers will be Arundequoit residents, so they can vote before or after Mass. So some of those same parking spots for people that are attending the Mass will also be voters. So we did take a look at that, and we don't anticipate any trouble with parking.
Also, will there be a charge for use of meeting rooms in the new facility?
That's something that we'll have to look at closely. We do charge for the use of meeting rooms now. It's an important part of our revenue stream. It's something that we'll have to re-examine.
Another question as to why there are no longer 2 polling places. That's down to 1.
Well, the problem with the 2 polling places was that what seemed simple on the surface, depending on what school district you live in, it turned out not to be so simple. So we had to spend thousands of dollars to mail out postcards to people where it was unclear which place they were supposed to vote. And the 1 polling place solves that. The other issue that we were concerned about was that if we're voting in December, as you know, there's a really good chance the weather won't be pleasant. And so we wanted to find a place where if you had to stand in line to vote, you could at least do it inside. And fortunately, this facility that we're using next month will allow us to line up people inside if that's necessary. And that seemed pretty important.
The other issue, too, is we have been working very closely with Barb Janier, who handles all the elections for the town. We have doubled the number of tables. One of the issues became it was a table that might have, say, A through C or A through E. You had to sign up. The delay was in signing up to vote. It wasn't in the actual voting. That was very quick once you got signed in and identified yourself. So we have broken that down now where there won't be more than 2 at one table. So it should be very quick to go in. There will be double the number of voting machines and double the number of sign-ins. So Barb, I know, we just discussed it this morning, and she's been working very closely with the Board of Elections, and everyone feels very confident that we've corrected many of the problems that we had having the 2 locations.
Okay, and there was another question on why the central location in Arundequoit, other towns have not located their libraries centrally within their towns.
I think that's actually a huge plus, and I think
That's really interesting because when I first started working here and we started looking at this library question, we got continual input from people that they didn't want their neighborhood library to close. An understandable sentiment. They'd been using them since 1963. So if we were going to suggest this radical departure from the way libraries operate in this town, and proximity to the branch seemed very, very important to everyone, so it just seemed like a logical next step for the board to say, well, we're going to do our darndest to find a location that's central. And it is true, when we were examining that question, it is true that in most towns, the residents don't have the luxury of having a central location. That's why our library system is so powerful. People who live in southern Webster use the Penfield Library and so on. But it just seemed that striving for a central location was a really worthwhile goal to attempt, especially when people were expressing their love for their local library. So why not try to keep it as close to them as possible? It just seemed like the way to go.
And one last question. An individual is concerned, why can't voting be after 9 p.m.?
Yeah.
Why can't voting be until 9 p.m.? It goes from 9 a.m., if I'm correct, to 6
9
p.m.
a.m. to 6 p.m.
Well, I think because we put it on a Saturday, that they shorten the hours up a little bit. Plus, you got to decide that people who work in the polls, they come an hour before and they stay an hour later. So it'd be a 14 or 15-hour day for them. But because we wanted it on a Saturday, we thought we could shorten up the hours of the voting times.
And remember, all the absentee ballots have to be counted first.
Yeah, before, right.
Okay, now we have the principal question that's been asked a couple times, and I'll address the question to some degree. The Arundecoit Citizens for a Better Government, Inc. has put out a sheet of paper regarding some questions. Would we like to answer those questions regarding that? I know, Stephanie, you have a one in front of them. Would you like me to go down each line item? And Supervisor, you may want to stay up here to ask on some of these line items also. I don't know if you have this sheet. Okay, why don't you step up and I'll let you take a look at it.
Yeah, well, I guess we could just take it one by one. The third,
Can we close the door?
No, I don't think we can.
the
Meeting, you can't close.
The $13 million construction cost, yes, that is the amount that is the bond resolution. There was a recent letter to the editor that actually claimed that there was a $22 million bond resolution. There is only a $13 million bond resolution that'll be on the ballot. So that is the, will need to be the entire cost of what we're able to borrow, the town's able to borrow. $9 million in interest.
One moment until this disruption is stopped. You're disrupting the meeting.
$9 million in interest. We don't usually talk about this. This is the claim here. We've always said that the $29 per month or per year for the cost of the bond includes interest. $9 million interest is, as Mr. Barone points out, was given to him by our late board member. That is the maximum. If we were to borrow the $13 million all at once and take 30 years to pay it off, as anybody who has bought a car or has bought a home, there is interest. There is interest. But the $29 per year includes the interest, and the bond resolution was for $13 million, not for $22 million, which often is quoted out there. Total tax impact will be more since the cost to operate such a large building, twice the size of the branches, is more. We currently operate two buildings that are woefully inadequate as far as energy efficiencies. We're literally letting tax dollars fly out the windows and leave the doors because they're not efficient. Will it cost more to operate a bigger building? Quite possibly. It will cost more. But we are given an annual budget each year, and we have to make that annual budget work. So we can't spend more than our annual budget each year. And we do anticipate, and I think the experts would also say, that with a more energy efficient, with a green facility, it will be a lot more efficient. It could cost less in some degrees to operate, and the money that we'll be saving on staff salaries, because we'll be able to utilize our staffs better, could be a cost savings. We'll be able to also have potential revenue producing opportunities in a new building, which will then also offset those costs. I have not counted the 15 vacant businesses on Ridge Road. I do know that there is a lot of development happening in the town, so Mary Joyce, I don't know if you'd like to speak to that. There's some really exciting things happening in our town. Businesses are coming in. Businesses want to come in. Would you like to address that?
You know, business is something that will change with the environment, the consumer needs. Let's face it, we came out of a global recession in which businesses are starting now to feel that they have that ability to instill capital into the businesses. keep in mind that where vacancies occur, that's because it's a landlord who owns that property. There could be changes in the leasing agreements. For example, with franchises, they have a typical 20-year lease, and if at the end of that lease, if the landlord wishes to accommodate that leasehold by doing something that could affect it, that's why some businesses leave. It was reported, and it's no secret. Rochester Business Journal cited Irondequoit for the most rapid economic development since the 1990s in this past year in Irondequoit. Irondequoit has become a town that is being recognized as a town for economic development. It has to do with the stable taxes, has to do with a steady population base. We have younger families moving in. We have those things that our younger families are looking for, and I think it's a very positive thing for our town. So yes, there are vacancies, but they happen due to business interests that change with those individuals. I could speak more specifically about those, but I don't think that that is proprietary information that should be revealed.
I would just like to comment, if you read on the PowerPoint presentation, the endorsement from the Chamber. I don't know who should have their finger more on the pulse of what's going on with business than the Chamber of Commerce. And clearly they see this as a positive thing. And prior to this, at one of our workshops, we had, in fact, it was included in our PowerPoint before, where a person that lives in Irondequoit described how they go to the Webster Library. So now, instead of shopping at Harriman's, they're shopping at Hagedorn's. The money goes with you. So if I go to the library to get a book in Webster or Greece, which I do frequently because I'm an avid library person and we don't always have what I want, the money goes with you. I buy the gas over there, I do whatever other business. People don't run all over doing business. So if you go out to shop, you stop at the library, you get your gas and you do whatever, I don't see how you can not say that's an economic plus for this town to have the library.
The next two on here is that Irondequoit has the highest town and school taxes in the county. Do we want to hammer another tax nail into it? I would say that what we're trying to do is avoid additional tax increases because, as we said, we're continually trying to stretch our annual tax dollar budget between two full-service branches only 2.5 miles apart. So what we're trying to do is actually make more efficient use of those tax dollars. When did you last know that government spent less than what they could? I would say Irondequoit has done that quite regularly since our fund balances are at the healthiest level. So we could have actually spent all that money that was budgeted, but we didn't. So we've actually spent less than we could. Irondequoit does that quite regularly, and the library board does as well.
I think we should take a moment here to talk about rhetoric. When we discuss these issues up here, we purposely try to keep things as tame as possible and avoid inflammatory rhetoric. We say increase your taxes, not hammer another tax nail. Mm-hmm. So yes, I think we've been very, very upfront here. $29 a year, it's a tax increase. Mm-hmm. And what we're asking you is, do you want to, do you think this is worth it? We've made our case that certain services that we provide will be more efficient and will be more prolific if you agree to this. And so, yes, this is your decision. So, inflammatory rhetoric aside, do you want to do this?
Great point. Let's take that breather. Should I continue on this, or?
Do you want me to? Here's something to think about in terms of tax increase. When you have a general across-the-board tax increase, you don't actually see where it goes. It goes into a sewer, a playground. But you have the option now in voting on December 14th to target where your tax is. It's like a United Way donor designation. You're going to say that this $29 per 100,000, including the interest, gets me that library. I can go in and out of that library all day long, 6 or hopefully 7 days a week for free. I'm willing to spend that $29 because I can point to where my tax dollars are going, which is not the case in a general tax increase.
Do I continue to go?
I would.
You would or you wouldn't?
Any other questions we'd like to answer regarding this?
No,
Want me
Okay.
to go through these?
no.
Mary Joyce,
Want me
would
to
you like to be?
continue?
Well, I'm a little bit puzzled by some of these. A library is more than a repository of books, DVDs, and so forth. The plans are a multi-purpose room. There are smaller rooms, so I don't know why someone from the art club would call and say they were promised space. If you notice Town Hall, we have a revolving art gallery, and if the art club wished to be in one of those meeting rooms, I don't see why that is a problem, since they've been holding their exhibits at the Pauline Evans branch, so I'm not quite sure what that one means. The Irondequoit Band, that would be great if they'd be able to practice in the multipurpose room. I would hope the orchestra would also have that opportunity. So I'm not quite sure, who's saying what, because I'll have to go on my own history with my own libraries where I grew up and taught. We would frequently have theatrical productions at the library, and I participated in many of those. So I see the library as being more global than just the books. So that's why I'm not quite sure what those statements mean, and I wish I could address those better than that. In terms of the actual bonding and the cost, I think that's something that Supervisor-elect Bello will be discussing with you and fiscal advisors and ORIC on what will be in the best interest of the town based on the bond resolution and the funds that have been accumulated. It's just something that will all be worked out.
A big question here is, can you trust the library board?
Here we are.
Here we are. We've done this 22 times now. We've got tons of information on the website. We've worked tirelessly to try to provide as much information as possible so so the residents can read and discern for themselves whether they want to say yes or no on this. We've been very open. So I'd like to think that the answer to that question is yes. We've never shied away from questions. There's another comment here that the library board supported the illegal vote in April. To my knowledge, there has been no legal determination on the vote. It's never been declared illegal. We supported the right for residents to have a say, and they had a say on April 23rd. Whether or not that vote actually can stand now or not, they had their vote, and they voiced their opinions, and we do hope that people come out again and voice their opinions on December 14th. There's a false statement here claiming of a false statement that's attributed to me. Two statements here. It will cost $697,000 more to improve and expand the 2 library branches. Correct. That is true, even though it says it's false here. Passero brought the numbers into 2012 figures. I should comment that the letter I was responding to claimed that it would actually cost half the current proposal to renovate and expand the 2 branches, and that's what I was responding to. So it was originally claimed that it would cost half. That's what I was responding to. The $6.2 million is just to renovate the buildings with no square footage. So I was focusing in on that expansion piece, that it would not cost half to expand each branch. According to Passero, the claim here is that it would cost $2 million less to improve and double the size of the 2 current convenient branches. Did I intentionally make a false statement, or is that a lie? The answer is neither. I did not intentionally make a false statement, and I did not lie. Option C, that Passero brought into 2012 numbers, which was 2 branches at approximately 50,000 square feet total, renovations with additions. The total project cost is $13,696,980. That's the total cost for that project, including contingencies, incidental costs, and all the costs that are going to be that would account for our that we have to spend $13 million. So I neither lied nor made an intentional false statement. False statement, residents' petition to the court was anti-library, said by Mrs. Squiccerini and others. I answered this question on a news broadcast also, if it was fair to call the lawsuit anti-library, and I think that the people who supported and funded the lawsuit also supported and funded Vote No, and they're still supporting and funding Vote No efforts on this project. I think it is fair to say that it was anti-library. Is that an opinion? Okay, yes, in our opinion, it seems very anti-library to continue to spend money to encourage people to vote no on a project. False statement claim to expand Cooper Road Library with second floor requires large columns inside, taking valuable space. Engineers did advise us. There's actually a study on the library site. I'm not sure if it's been moved over to the proposal site, but there was an engineering study done, and we were advised against trying to add a second floor to either branch because of the columns that would take up space. Is it possible? The truth here is claiming that information from an engineer, an architect, and structural engineer state that columns are not needed. A method using the size of the building with architectural supports can be used to support a second floor, as done often in New York City. I can say I've never seen any report from any engineer or structural engineer or architect that have claimed that. I will trust that this might be a true statement. I can only imagine that it's probably pretty expensive. That was not even a cost that we studied in our options because we were advised against it.
A letter from the engineers on our website.
So we did look at that. So I think we've addressed all of this.
Stephanie, one thing I'd like to point out that when I was doing the parking analysis, the Cooper Road building is underparked by town code. And that building really should be reduced in square footage in order to meet code. And some of the parking spaces that are immediately adjacent to Cooper Road are actually illegal and dangerous. If you were to expand that by adding a second floor, you would probably need to include a parking garage or to take property, which would all go into the capital costs. When I was looking at the Ridge Road, that could probably be expanded to 12,000 square feet to about 17,000 to 18,000 square feet based on the parking that was available. So that building is overparked by code. And so if you were to expand that, the most you could get out of it is about 12,000 to 18,000 square feet. So yeah, it's possible to do a lot of things in New York City. Completely different world.
They don't have
My brother-in-law's a
ADA
contractor there. We're not New York City.
Right, correct. Thank you, Larry.
When we did our feasibility study on expanding the McGraw branch, it was recommended that we try to purchase that row of homes on the first side street in from Ridge Road in order to make a truly good project. So I don't think that cost is factored into any of our estimates, but it would be significant.
And we as a library board felt we didn't want to be known as the board that were taking people's homes, so we didn't want to start buying up people's homes.
I can only imagine the rhetoric.
And there again, those homes come off.
They come off the tax rolls.
Excuse me, one more thing. There was another question, and the supervisor will address it, concerning the identification for the voting and the reason for it. There was a question concerning why do I need a...
When you go to a general election, the Board of Elections has the books in which, if you recall, they cover up your signature when you sign for that election, and then they compare the signatures. This is a referendum vote. The procedure's a little bit different. You do have to show photo ID that you are the person who is voting for that address that's in the book that comes from the Board of Elections. So that's the difference, is because you do need to have that ID. Even if you don't have a driver's license, you can get non-vehicular forms that have your picture on them. I know my picture's on the credit card, much better than what I look. But, even your passport, whatever. And I would say if you had any questions, you could ask those later.
That was the last question, right, Peter, that you had coming forth? What we'd like to do now is go down the board and let them make any statements that they'd like to make.
Start with me?
Yes.
I'd like to just make one statement that, it's been at least 20 years since Arundecoit's capital improvement project. And I believe that people will be impressed once we get down to the final design of this library. I think once it gets built, knowing from experience, you'll be driving by and it'll look like it's always been there. It's a creator of jobs. It's going to give business to vendors. And I think it's the right thing to do. And can you expand and add floors and things to the other libraries? Absolutely. Should you do it? Is it the right thing to do? Not at all. So I think that this is a good project, and I think you will be impressed once we dwindle it down to the final design of this library. And and the final point that I will make is the people to my right are extremely hardworking. And can you trust the library board? Absolutely. And I never heard a more of insulting statement in all my life.
I'd like to make this comment, and if we look around the room, the majority of us are senior citizens. At what point in time do we look to sell our homes? And with a new library on this campus, and this is not the first time it's been brought up to put a library on the town hall campus. 10 years ago, they were looking at the west side. But a new library will certainly enhance property values in town and give maybe some of us a break when it comes time to selling our homes.
My professional experience allowed me to work with multiple school districts over many years. And this is the first time as a school person that I've ever experienced a component in the community that didn't support an effort to expand, modify, rebuild, build brand new a library because of the importance of having the total library media experience. And schools cannot do everything for the community because they have a very different purpose. So I'm very pleased to see that we have such a large number of persons in the community that support this effort because it is critical.
I would encourage people to make sure they get out and vote. Don't assume that because it passed overwhelmingly the last time that your vote isn't needed. Whether you are for or against, don't let someone else make the decision for you. It's unfortunate that we have to do this again, but make sure you're there. We've been promised double the inspectors, so the lines should move quickly. It's so important. Don't let someone else make this decision for you, please.
In 1997, I was asked to be on a citizens long-range planning board committee for the library system. We studied that for a year, a little over a year. At that point in time, when I went on the committee, my commitment was to 2 libraries in 2 locations. I was going to die before that position changed. We studied that for a year. This was a citizens committee, okay? We had virtually no contact with the library and the library board or the town board. Yes, we did have input. People would come and talk with us, but we were actually on our own to go out and get the best information that we could find and develop our opinions. That's the way the committee was formed. It was the committee's unanimous choice in 1998 to publish a report recommending a single central library.
I think everything that can be said has been said and re-said, and I guess I would just say if anybody still has questions, please take the time to read what's on all the different websites you've been told, the papers that were passed out today. It really saddens me to have people say after all these presentations, why are you doing this or why are you doing that? I think we've tried our best to answer them and answer them truthfully, and I'm with John on feeling insulted about that. I've lived in this town 50 years. I've been involved in multiple nonprofits and giving of my time, and I definitely resent anyone saying that I'm not a trustworthy person. But please take the time to read up on it. Talk to your neighbors if they haven't. Encourage them to get the facts, because that's where you should be making your decision on what are the facts.
I had written out a whole series of things that I was going to say, but Joe, you'll be happy to know I'm not going to say any of them. I've probably
We're going to have
talked
time
enough.
for lunch.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've talked enough. I'm going to go to a yoga class after this. But I just want to thank you all for coming and being engaged in the process. We may not all have the same opinions on how to move forward, but it's important to have that dialogue and be respectful of each other's opinions. You may not agree with each other. I may not agree with everything that was said and asked, but I need to respect it, and I do respect it because this is an important decision that we'll all be making again on December 14th. And whatever happens on December 15th, we need to move forward together. So I just want to thank you all for coming and being engaged and being together on this project.
I just want to say that you should definitely vote. This is all up to you. And, rhetoric aside, accusations, insinuations, whatever, just get out and vote. Inform yourselves however you choose, and don't sit back and let it happen. Be a participant and vote, please.
Oh, I do have one more thing to say. I'm sorry, Joe, but thanks to the Friends of the Library and thank you to Peter Mendick for being here and helping us out. So thank you very much to all of you guys, too. Now I'm done, I swear.
She's never really done. Okay, then. My last comments, because I get the mic, the last thing is, look at the people we have here, okay? We have the supervisor to be, and I've been advised both are pushing for the library, okay? So I'm sorry, we have a Republican, we have a Democrat, and it's not about politics. It's not about the conservative, the liberal, it's about the growth of your town. Okay, and I take issue to, can you trust the library board? Okay, I don't know, can you trust any board? Could you trust the board, the town board in the 80s? Could you trust any board? All right, so go out and vote, do the right thing. I don't know how many more of these we can go through. This is the 22nd. One more. That will be December 11th. Okay. I'd like to thank the board for just getting a flyer that was dropped here and attempting to answer the questions without any prep work to do it. I think you took on an enormous task by just trying to go at and be honest with the answer. So I guess I can trust the library board. I'm on it, and I'd like to thank all my fellow members for being part of the team. That concludes today's meeting. Again, it'll be 7 o'clock on December 11th, same place, same time. If there's some questions that you'd like to bring up, we're all going to be around for a little. What time?
Different time.
An evening meeting.
7 o'clock at
You
night.
said same time, but.
Oh, I did. Thanks for catching me. Same place, 7 o'clock p.m. Okay, thank you.